Justin, great to see you as always. Your reaction to this deal to come up with a longer-term deal later?
Let me give you a short-term reaction and a longer run. The short-term reaction is this is very good news. Our tariffs on China were previously so high it was effectively an embargo. We don't actually have to travel to Geneva for the US government to decide to cut the rate at which it taxes Americans for importing goods from China, but I'm glad that it did. And it's going to create a whole lot of calm for the next few days. The medium run thing to worry about is at the moment the half-life of a tariff announcement from the White House is around 6 to 8 days. So as encouraged as I am that this is the movement, the direction in which it's moving, I'm not sure that that businesses can be confident that we're going to hit the more harmonious times that we had prior to this administration.
The director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, says that China made certain concessions when it came to allowing U.S. exporters to enter the Chinese market or certain aspects of the Chinese market. I wonder what you make of that. Is that a win that the White House can point to justify levying these tariffs to begin with?
Oh, it's not a win and it's not a justification, but more to the point, when the White House says we got some concessions, but I'm not telling you what they are, they told us this about the Britain-UK deal, and it turns out that the UK-US deal, that was actually not a deal. It was an agreement to have an agreement at some point in the future. So if it's not written down and signed and they're not willing to show us that, then I'm not sure I believe it.
I do wonder what you think might make some of these tariffs worth it. In other words, what your guideposts are for justifying the trade war that this White House has launched, if they do in fact make it so that supply chains are reconfigured and the U.S. is less reliant on China, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is suggesting the administration will continue to pursue. Do you see that as a win?
Boris, let's not tie ourselves up in knots trying to make sense of something that we can't make sense of. Look, every time the administration's moved towards more tariffs, the markets have fallen. They're very unhappy about this. They think it undermines the profitability of American business. Every time the administration walks back, markets cheer. They think that that's useful economic policy, as does most of the economics establishment. Look, the long-run damage here, I think, is really worth emphasizing. Let me take you back. Remember during COVID, global supply chains became fractured, and there became a lot of talk that what we needed was more robust, reliable supply partners. There was talk of onshoring and friendshoring. Well, this time, something similar is happening, but it's happening in other countries, and it's not caused by a virus, it's caused by the White House. The United States has shown itself to be an unreliable trading partner, and more to the point, its tariff policies change day to day and week to week, and as a result, our foreign trading partners are looking for more robust, more stable, more reliable trading partners. And so already they're starting to diversify away from the United States.
If the next dozen plus deals look like what's been struck between the U.S. and the U.K. and the U.S. and China, what do you imagine this is going to do to the global economy? Is it actually going to affect some great change?
Not much. So let me characterize the British deal because I think it's the one that sets the standard for the rest of the world except for China. The British deal is basically the US has decided, President Trump has decided, in fact, that tariffs on every other country around the world will be 10%. I want you to put that in a big sheet of paper. Let's make it 48-point font. And next to that, there's a little asterisk. The little asterisk says, if you're willing to come to the Rose Garden and put on a dog and pony show and make the president feel good, we'll make a few little carve-outs for you as well. But when you look at the details of the British deal, the 10% is the most important part. The asterisk turns out to be incredibly small. There really were no economically important carve-outs. And so I think other countries around the world right now are looking at this and they're understanding that the US government doesn't want Americans buying stuff from them, and so they may be looking elsewhere for trading partners.
President Trump hitting pause on his trade war with China. The U.S. and China agreed to roll back drastically the tariffs they've slapped on each other's exports, but only for 90 days while they negotiate a longer deal. Now, markets are rallying on the news. The Dow up nearly 1,000 points. Investors are very eager to see the world's two biggest economies stepping back from the brink. The U.S. is slashing its tariff from 145% to 30%, still historically high. Now, China will lower its tariffs on U.S. goods from 125 to 10%. So, is this a win for the president? I'm back with my panel. Tia, is this a win for the president?
I mean, I guess today is a win. But overall, is it a win? Not necessarily, because you just mentioned the tariffs on goods from China are still historically high, which means consumers in America are still paying more for things than they did previous to the Trump administration. And again, there's still so much uncertainty about what this deal will look like and what will happen after a 90-day pause. And I think a lot of people, even allies of Donald Trump, are still struggling to figure out what is he trying to accomplish with these tariffs? Is he trying to move manufacturing to the U.S.? Is he trying to bully foreign countries into better trade deals? We still don't know. I don't know how we can consider that a win.
There was some certainty prior to today, which was that if the tariff remained at 145%, there was no trade, and we were certainly headed for an economic recession. Mm-hmm. That was the certainty. So I agree there is some uncertainty now, but this is clearly welcome news to the markets. And obviously, this is Donald Trump trying to put forth the vision that he's had for decades about tariffs. And it's just, even listening to the way you frame the conversation, Manu, when you say he's putting a pause on his trade war. If he had come out day one and said, I'm putting a 30% tariff on China, we would call that a trade war, not a pause on a trade war, right? But he had set this up. So two things can be true here. It is true that he made this mess and put the economy into this tailspin and is now cleaning it up to some degree to good reviews from the market. It is also true that we do not yet know if this is going to work and achieve his ultimate goals here. That remains to be seen, and that's where the uncertainty exists.
And this is how Trump framed it this morning when speaking at the White House before he left on this foreign trip.
It would go up substantially higher. You know, at 145, you're really decoupling because nobody's going to buy. But they can go, they got very high because of additional tariffs I applied during the course because of fentanyl and other things. But they'd go substantially higher.
He's saying they go substantially higher if they can't get a deal within 90 days. So perhaps short-lived win.
Yeah, and perhaps trying to keep the pressure on for his negotiators to come to some sort of an agreement with the Chinese to try to calm this trade war. But yes, I mean, we've seen how his tariff policy through the beginning of the administration has been all over the place. You know, it's on, it's off, it's on this sector, it's not on this sector, and it's just kind of that chaos that he himself has created that he is now then scaling back. To David's point, I did think, just as a Congress note and as a Congress nerd and as a side note, he also said this morning that he was going to raise so much money from all of his actions, whether it's the tariffs or with the prescription drug pricing order that he announced this morning, that he told Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune that you can use this to score your big tax bill. I don't know if the Congressional Budget Office would agree on that, but I also do think that
or the hardliners in the House GOP.
But I also do think that speaks to the other struggle that he's having with his big agenda on Capitol Hill, how to make all those numbers work, and those numbers are pretty complicated.
Yeah, and Stephen, you wrote about this over the weekend, about the negotiations that is happening behind the scenes. You talk about any negotiation at any time be blown up by Trump's unorthodox and volatile approach, and his capriciousness hangs over all the negotiations.
That's true. At the same time, that unorthodox style could unlock some openings that other presidents who act in a more traditional way perhaps wouldn't be able to access. There's not a huge amount of evidence, especially from his first term, that actually worked. Remember when he met Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader? That was a great series of photo ops and summits, but it didn't stop the nuclear program. To your point as well, I think the White House says what they're doing here is a three-legged stool. You do rebalance trade with tariffs, you bring in a load of revenue, you use that revenue to create some of the tax cuts beyond the extension of the tax cut, you know, no tax on tips, etc., and then you do deregulation, and they say by the end of the year, the economy is going to take off like a rocket. I think there's a lot of reason to question whether that's true, but we're going to find out.
I mean, that's the thing. They're trying to argue this long-term strategy here, passing this bill that is now just being released in the House that deals with a whole wide range of issues. But getting a big tax deal through, and then having it implemented, have the American public feel the effect of this, in addition to all these trade deals, that's going to take a significant amount of time, well beyond the midterms of next year.
A lot of time, and what they're banking on is that people will stick with them. And I don't know if that's going to be the case. Again, we've in the past week not just heard about, don't worry that the economy isn't rebounding in the way Trump promised, but now, your kids might not have the Christmas that they want and things like that. And again, we're talking already about the midterms, and there are a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill who are just as concerned, but I think there are voters who are waiting for the Trump administration to make good on its promises, and hearing, hey, there's going to be some more pain before it gets better is not what they were promised.